This video is a part of the training course on international standards on risk management, which was developed within ISTRA project. This video class is prepared and recorded by the Bulgarian Institute for Standardization. It contains questions and answers to some of the most important issues related to risk management standards. Let's start with the questions. Question number 1. What is ISO 31000 standard about? The official title of the standard is ISO 31000 of 2018 Risk Management Guidelines. There is a slight mistake on this slide, which states that it's principle and guidelines. In fact, the new standard contains only guidelines in its title. As seen from the title, the standard gives guidelines on how to manage risks in an organization. The standard defines risk as effect of uncertainty on objectives. Risk is a necessary part of doing business. And in a world where enormous amounts of data are being processed at increasingly rapid rates, identifying and mitigating risks is a challenge for any company. It is no wonder, then, that many contracts and insurance agreements require solid evidence of good risk management practice. ISO 31000 provides direction on how companies can integrate risk-based decision-making into an organization's governance, planning, management, reporting, policies, values, and culture. It is an open, principles-based system, which means it enables organizations to apply the principles in the standard to the organizational context. ISO 31000 provides a risk management framework that supports all activities, including decision-making across all levels of the organization. ISO 31000 framework and its processes should be integrated with management systems to ensure consistency and the effectiveness of management control across all areas of the organization. The standard is applicable to all organizations, regardless of type, size, activities, and location, and it covers all types of risk. It is intended for use by anyone who manages risks and not just professional risk managers. As regards certification, ISO 31000 provides guidelines and not requirements. It is therefore not intended for certification purposes. This gives managers the flexibility to implement the standard in a way that suits the needs and the objectives of their organizations. Question number 2. Why was ISO 31000 developed? The reason for development of the standard lies in the worldwide economic crisis, which affected numerous companies, businesses, and economies. The standard was targeted to help industry and commerce, public and private organizations to recover from the crisis. It all started when Australia and New Zealand standards body developed a national standard on risk management, which was published in November 1995, revised in 1999, and then again in 2004. Standards organizations in Canada and Japan followed with their own versions, respectively, in 1997 and 2001. However, it turned out that there was a global need for generic guide. Generic guide is a commonly used guide. This guide needed to be applicable to risk management process, which to be used for all organizations of all sizes, both private and public. That is why in 2002, ISO and IEC published ISO IEC Guide 73, Risk Management Vocabulary Guidelines for Use in Standards. Following from the publication of this guide, in 2004, it became clear that there was a need of an ISO standard on risk management. And so, in November 2009, the first edition of ISO 31000 was published by ISO. In 2018, the standard was revised. Question number 3. What are the benefits of ISO 31000 for a business? ISO 31000 helps organizations develop a risk management strategy, which should effectively identify and mitigate risks. This allows them to increase the likelihood of achieving their objectives and increases the protection of their assets. Its goal is to develop a risk management culture where employees and stakeholders are aware of the importance of monitoring and managing risk. Implementing ISO 31000 also helps organizations see both the positive opportunities and negative consequences associated with the risk. And it allows for more informed and effective decision making. More important, it can be an active component in improving an organization's governance and performance. Question number 4. What are the most important terms used in the standard? Objectives. Objectives are the outcomes that the organization is seeking to achieve from its activities. Risk. As already mentioned, risk is the effect of uncertainty on objectives. But then, what is uncertainty? Uncertainty is the state of deficiency of information. Risk management. Risk management is coordinated activities to direct and control an organization with regard to risk. Risk management framework, set of components that provide the foundations and organizational arrangements for designing, implementing, monitoring, reviewing, and continually improving risk management throughout the organization. Risk management policy. This is the statement of the overall intentions and direction of an organization related to risk management. Risk management plan. The risk management plan is a scheme within the risk management framework which specifies the approach, the management components, and resources to be applied to the management of risk. Risk management process. This is the systematic application of management policies, procedures, and practices to the activities of communicating, consulting, establishing the context, and identifying, analyzing, evaluating, treating, monitoring, and reviewing risk. Stakeholder. A stakeholder is a person or an organization that can affect, be affected by, or perceive themselves to be affected by a decision or activity. What is external context? External context is the external environment in which the organization seeks to achieve its objectives. And on the contrary, internal context is the internal environment in which the organization seeks to achieve its objectives. Risk criteria. Those are the terms of reference against which the significance of a risk is evaluated. Risk identification. This is the process of finding, recognizing, and describing risks. Risk source. This is an element which alone or in combination with other elements has the potential to give rise to risk. And finally, what is controls? Control is a measure that maintains and or modifies risk. Now let's go to the question number 5. What are the main principles of risk management? The figure you see on your screen is a part of the ISO 31000 standard 2018 edition. We'll now go through it briefly, explaining in a few words what each principle implies. You see in the center of the figure, it's written value creation and protection. This is the core principle of risk management, and it means that risk management creates and protects value. Integrated. The principle implies that risk management is an integral part of all organizational processes. This will be explained in more details a little bit later. Structured and comprehensive. Risk management is systematic or should be systematic, structured, and timely. Customized. This means that the risk management should be tailored to the specific organizational needs, objectives, environment, stakeholders, etc. Inclusive. Risk management should be transparent and inclusive. The principle of dynamic means that risk management should be dynamic, iterative, and responsive to change. Best available information. Risk management is based on the best available information and should be based on the best available information. Human and cultural factors. Risk management takes human and cultural factors into account. And finally, continual improvement. This means that risk management should facilitate continual improvement of the organization. Question number 6. What is the risk management process? Again, we'll use a figure which is included in the standards of 2018. Risk management is a process used to avoid, reduce, or control risks. There are 5 core steps to risk management process, which are shown in this figure. The first step is scope, context, criteria. The main purpose of this step is to understand and consider the environment, the context, internal and external, and anything that poses a risk to what the organization is trying to do. In this process of establishing the context, we need to identify the external and internal stakeholders. At the same time, as a next important issue, at this step we need to define our risk criteria against which we will measure our risks during evaluation. Then you see the next box is risk assessment, which includes risk identification, risk analysis, risk evaluation. Identifying the risks. Risk identification is the process of finding, recognizing, and describing risks. To identify the risks, the organization should determine first the risk sources. Where do the risks come from? Second, the risk causes. What is the root cause of risk? Third, what events or changes in circumstances trigger risks? Fourth, what are the potential consequences of risk? And we can continue with other questions applicable to our organization. Next substep is risk analysis. In analyzing a risk, we are deciding on the relationship between the likelihood of a risk occurring and the consequences of the risk we have identified. We have to define the level of risk and what it means in terms of managing the risk. Risk evaluation. At this step, we are deciding whether a risk is acceptable or needs treatment. The evaluation involves comparing the level of risk with risk criteria which were defined during the first step. Next important action or step is treating the risks. At this step, we decide whether the risk should be avoided, controlled, transferred to another party, or retained. We choose the best option to treat the risk for our organization. As you see, there are some other activities which lie both sides of the main core steps on this figure, and those are supporting activities which should be implemented during all steps of the risk process, the risk management process. Those are the processes of communication and consultation to the left, and monitoring and review process, which you see to the right of the core steps. They serve as a feedback mechanism to guide the successful implementation of risk management. The organization needs to constantly monitor and evaluate the strategies it is using to manage risks, as risks do not remain the same. And in the lower part of the circle, you see recording and reporting. This is also a supporting process, which we'll now explain. Recording and reporting. Risk management process and its outcomes are traceable via recording. Recording and reporting provides foundation for improvement to the process and framework, to methods and tools, and to the way the process is applied and risks are controlled. All phases of the risk management process and their implementation should be well documented and reported. Recording the risk management process. To ensure that risk management is effective and to provide evidence of a demonstrable risk management system, it is important to have a documented formal record of the risk management process and outcome. Formal risk reporting in an organization. Formal risk reporting is an important part of being able to demonstrate the effectiveness of the risk management program. The organization is required to report to various internal and external bodies and stakeholders. To achieve this, the organization needs to be informed about risks in a timely manner and to be able to produce risk assessments easily. Let's go to question number 7. What is risk management framework? Again, we use a figure from the 2018 standard to describe the risk management framework. The framework, introduced in ISO 31000, is a management structure aimed at making the generic process for managing risk part of all activities, processes, and functions of the organization. The standard provides guidelines how to design, implement, and continuously improve this framework that will integrate risk management into the organization's overall governance, strategy, planning, management, reporting processes, policies, values, and culture. The framework has all attributes of a management system. However, it is not intended to substitute the organization's management system. It assists the organization to integrate risk management into the existing overall management system. Let's now go through the elements of the framework. In the center of the circle, you see leadership and commitment. This component is related to the strategic policy planning, and the management of the organization should ensure strong and sustained commitment for risk management at all levels by taking the following actions. Define and endorse policy to establish the risk management approach, plan, or course of action. Align risk management objectives with the objectives, strategies, and culture of the organization. Assign accountabilities and responsibilities at appropriate levels within the organization. Ensure that the necessary resources are allocated to risk management. Develop risk criteria and ensure that they are communicated to the organization and its stakeholders. Promote systematic monitoring of risks. Communicate the value of risk management to the organization and its stakeholders. Design. Design a framework for managing risk. The design of the framework depends significantly on the external and internal context of the organization. The first step is to evaluate the impact of the external environment and its key drivers and trends on the objectives of the organization. Special attention needs to be paid to the role of the stakeholders and their perceptions and values on the organization. When designing the risk management framework, the top management clearly states the following commitments and objectives to risk management through a policy or a statement. The links between the organization's objectives and policies and the risk management policy. The need to integrate risk management into the overall culture of the organization. The authorities, responsibilities, and accountabilities for managing risk. The way in which conflicting objectives are dealt with. The commitment to make the necessary resources available. The performance indicators by which risk management will be measured and reported. The commitment to review and improve the risk management performance and framework periodically and in response to an event or change in circumstances. The policy towards risk management becomes effective in the organization with ensuring the necessary designation of accountability, authority, and appropriate competence for managing risk. This needs to be linked to the established adequate controls and their effectiveness and efficiency. Appropriate resources for risk management allocated by the management need to include at least the following: resources, people, skills, experience, and competence needed for each step of the risk management process. The organization's processes, methods, and tools to be used for managing risks, documented processes and procedures, information and knowledge management systems, and professional development and training needs. Internal and external communication and reporting mechanisms are established in order to support and encourage accountability and ownership of risk. Let's try to share our screen again. It should be okay now. Implementation. Implementing risk management framework. The implementation of the risk management framework will be facilitated by developing an appropriate plan, including time and resources, identifying where, when, and how different types of decisions are made across the organization and by whom, modifying the applicable decision-making processes where necessary, ensuring that the organization's arrangements for managing risk are clearly understood and practiced. The process of implementing the organization's framework for managing risk starts with defining the appropriate timing and plan for implementing the framework. The effective implementation needs to ensure that decision making and the development and setting of objectives take into consideration the outcomes of risk management processes. Constant communication and consultation with stakeholders needs to ensure that risk management framework remains appropriate. Evaluation of the framework. In order to ensure that risk management framework is effective and continues to support organizational performance, the evaluation needs to include, or we should include in our evaluation the following: risk management framework is periodically measured against its purpose, implementation plans, indicators, and expected behavior. Progress is periodically measured and any deviation is reported. Review is performed periodically to check whether the risk management framework is still appropriate to support achieving the objectives of the organization. Reports are prepared on the risk progress with the risk management plan and how well the risk management policy is being followed. Improvement or continual improvement of the framework. Based on results of evaluation, monitoring, and reviews, relevant gaps or improvement opportunities are identified. The organization should develop plans and tasks and assign them to those accountable for implementation. The implementation of improvements should lead to constant the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the risk management framework and the way the risk management process is integrated. And finally, integration. Integration means that the risk management policy should be aligned and become an integral part of the organization. It ensures that the risk management policy is drafted so that its implementation will lead to risk management becoming a part of the organization. The policy part of the framework should be put into action by relevant organizational arrangements in the form of Plan, Do, Check, Act approach or PDCA approach and includes plans, relationships, accountabilities, resources, processes, and activities. To become operational, these components of the framework need to be adapted to the specific needs of the organization. What is the PDCA method approach? The PDCA cycle is a proven methodology that enables the organization to manage its operations and take actions in a systematic manner to realize its policy. The method provides ongoing iterative process that leads to continual process and system improvement. PDCA cycle is used as underlying approach in ISO 31000. It is applied to the risk management framework as a whole and to each of its individual elements to continually improve the risk management performance. The PDCA cycle consists of 4 steps. They are executed in logical sequence known as plan, do, check, act. The activities at each step include Step 1 Plan, which means to establish all necessary objectives and processes to deliver results in accordance with expected output. Step 2 Do. This means to implement the new processes and to deliver the results through them. Step 3 Check. At this step, you measure the result of the processes and monitor them to determine the differences or to detect any non-conformities. And final step 4 Act. Act is to identify areas for improvement in the next business cycle. Successful organizations consistently achieve their strategic goals by managing their business processes and risks using the PDCA method. The 4-step cycle and the risk management process are foundation of many management system standards like ISO 9001 Quality Management System Standard, ISO 14001 Environmental Management System Standard, or ISO 27001 Information Security Management System Standard. Next question, number 8. What is monitoring and review? We have already mentioned the monitoring and review activities in some previous slides. Let's go back to the figure of processes. As depicted in the figure, the monitoring and review processes are typical for each step and process in the risk management architecture. Monitoring and review are called a feedback mechanism in the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, as they represent the check phase and take account of how the planned processes have been implemented and what is the response of the internal and external environment. Based on this feedback information and data, in the next act phase, decisions are taken. What actions are necessary to improve the processes and their performance and to achieve better results? Monitoring presents routine surveillance of actual performance and its comparison with expected or required performance. It includes continual checking or investigating, supervising, critically observing, or determining the status in order to identify change from the performance level required or expected, as well as changes in context. A review on its part is an activity undertaken to determine the suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the framework and process to achieve established objectives. Reviews should consider the outputs from the monitoring activities. Both the risk management framework and the risk management process should be monitored and reviewed on an ongoing basis. The investment in monitoring and review of the risk management framework is the best way to provide quality assurance of the risk management framework and the process. Question number 9. What is continual improvement? This is the last step of the PDCA cycle of risk management. Improvement is a main topic of each management system and framework. In fact, the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle is based on a kind of improvement model directed to continually reflect the changes stemming from running the organization's business and adapting to the changing environment. The improvement projects in risk management typically follow the essential steps of problem solving, which include define problems or objects of health risk management component, collect and analyze the data on the problem and the relevant processes, select and implement the preferred solutions, evaluate the effectiveness of the solutions, incorporate the solutions into the routine operations. The risk management policy related to continual improvement may include also the following: improving the extent of integration of risk management activity into the general activity of the organization, improving the quality of risk management, improving the framework, for example, improving the quality of the information or the access to the information, improving the speed of decision making. Some of the most well-known triggers for continual improvement in risk management include, for example, opportunities for improvement identified as a result of routine monitoring and review of the framework and the process. New knowledge becoming available. A substantial change to the organization's internal and external context. The goal of continual improvement should be made clear in the organization's risk management policy, and it should be continually communicated in both formal and informal way. And now let's proceed to the last question. Question number 10. Why ISO 31000 was revised and what are the most important changes? Usually, ISO standards are reviewed every 5 years, and if needed, standards are revised. This helps ensure that standards remain relevant useful tools for the marketplace. A revised version of ISO 31000 was published in 2018, as already mentioned, and that was to take into account the evolution of the market and the new challenges which businesses and organizations face since the standard was first released in 2008 and 9, sorry. One example of this could be the increased complexity of economic systems and emerging risk factors, such as, let's say, digital currency. Both of those can present new and different types of risks to an organization on an international scale. The new ISO 31000 provides more strategic guidance than the edition of 2009. It places more emphasis on both the involvement of senior management and the integration of risk management into the organization. This includes the requirement to develop a statement or a policy that confirms a commitment to risk management, assigning authority, responsibility, and accountability at the appropriate levels within the organization, and ensuring that the necessary resources are allocated to the risk management process. The revised standard now also requires that risk management be part of the organization's structure, processes, objectives, strategy, and activities. It places a greater focus on creating value as the key driver of risk management and features other related principles which we already explained, such as continual improvement, inclusion of stakeholders, customizations to the organization, consideration of human and cultural factors. The content of the standard has been streamlined to reflect an open systems model that regularly exchanges feedback with external environment in order to fit a wider range of needs and contexts. The key objective is to make things clearer and easier, using plain language to define the fundamentals of risk management in a way that the reader will find easier to comprehend. The terminology is now more concise, with certain terms being moved to ISO Guide 73, risk management vocabulary, which deals specifically with risk management terminology and is intended to be used alongside ISO 31000. The work has commenced on a terminology standard and implementation handbook to further enhance the understanding and applicability of the standard. And now, thank you for the attention.